It is time for Pet Files Ask the Vet, underwritten by the Millerton Veterinary Practice, traditional small animal medicine and surgery, chiropractic, laser therapy, acupuncture, and Chinese herbal medicine. 518-789-3440, millertonvet.com. With us today, Dr. Carolyn Cannon, owner and chief vet at the Millerton Veterinary Practice. Hello, Dr. Cannon.
Good morning. Good morning, Jill and Marshall.
Good morning.
And the dogs.
And the dogs. I was listening to the dogs going, that's soothing, and then I realized I was supposed to say something. Like, hi, it's time for Pet Files.
When everybody jogs by the house, they always look in, and the dogs bark, and they wave, and I try to tell them if they don't stop and wave, the dogs will sooner or later stop barking. But
will sooner stop barking.
It's sooner, exactly right.
But
yeah.
but
Which is the key.
but people love to see them jump up and get on the couch and howl because they got that coonhound howl. So.
Yeah.
All right, so Ruby, New York City. Hi. That's nice. Was in the dog park this morning and heard something about a pet food recall over vitamin D toxicity. Any inkling?
So, yes, we do get alerts about pet food recalls every day, almost every day. It seems like a couple times a week.
Really?
Yeah, lots and lots of pet food recalls, sometimes more than once a week. So there have been a couple of foods that I've never actually heard the names of before that have been recalled for vitamin D toxicity. So what happens is, these foods are made and are manufactured in big plants, and the formulas are made and put in the computer, and there are lots of potential mistakes can be made. So that type of thing doesn't happen very often, but too much vitamin D can be toxic. Lots of other issues that are potentially life-threatening, but vitamin D is probably the worst one. And so some dogs have gotten sick from these foods. So what I would suggest is that, if you feed your dog, to keep up on this, instead of waiting until it comes in the newspaper, there is a good site that we use through the AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association. You can go to the site, once a week if you want, or every day if you'd like to, and they have a lovely updated site on any food that's recalled either through the manufacturer or by the FDA.
And how do you get to it? Just through?
So it's AVMA, www.avma.org, and then from there you should be able to find it.
Okay, so avma.org and .org. And that's it's not something to get obsessive over. But the one thing though that I think I learned from you many years ago, is that when there is a small company, a small and good company that is bought out by a big company, everyone should ask themselves about the sourcing, because obviously while it's profitable for the little company to be absorbed by the big company, the big company has resources, let's just say, that aren't that are greater than those of the small company, and some of those resources might not be as pure.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
and they're the bigger the company, it feels like the more that they're driven to profit. So it is all about the profit. They have boards. They have to show a profit every quarter, and so in order to show a profit in dog food, you need to cut back on what it costs to make it, because there's only so many. There are only so many things that you can. There's only so much people will pay for it, right?
Right, and I think the other thing is, if you have the misfortune of watching any television whatsoever, you see how big the pet care industry. People will spend money on their pets. The most recent thing I saw, I think, was there are now interior designers for pets. So that your cat.
I need one of those.
I do too. Hey, find a need and fill it, make a fortune. But as the person who was doing the story was quick to point out, now this is not inexpensive. So you've got a combination where there are dollars to be spent because everyone wants to take care of their fur babies, but by the same token, you've got to you want that money to be well spent.
Right, and wherever there's money being spent, there are going to be companies popping up all over the place. So there's
mushrooms.
Yeah.
All right. Jace in Brooklyn. My 3-year-old border collie Willow has been suffering with what my vet has been diagnosing as seasonal allergies for a long time. I've been paying close attention, and I'm certain that the cause is not environment or diet, but rather the combination of medicines she's on for flea and heartworm, and the dozens of booster vaccines he's always pushing on me. His last suggestion was that I just keep her on itch-blocking medication indefinitely, which is $86 a bottle, and it's just more chemicals. I really want to get Willow off the merry-go-round of medications and allergic reactions, but right now she's chewing and licking her tail so bad she's getting sores. I'm at a loss. Do you have any advice?
Well, my advice is to go to a holistic veterinarian. Simple as that. I mean, if you're on the, we have to make choices. It's not easy. It's not nearly as easy to treat your dog or to feed your dog holistically. So, number one, you have to be on board with it because you have to make choices about what you're willing to do and what you're willing to spend money on, which is food, for one thing. And what kind of risks are you willing to take? So, number one, paying close attention is not the same thing as science. There isn't hard science on any of this. What does the vaccination do to the immune system? How come it's okay for some animals and other animals can't tolerate it? We don't know the answers to that. Well, what we do know is that it might be best, just from experience, to vaccinate as little as is needed. And sometimes it's hard to tell what is needed, and you also have to take the risk versus benefit into consideration. So, number one, if you're seeing a holistic veterinarian, then they're going to be able to discuss that with you as far as the vaccination goes. So, you want to see a veterinarian who's not necessarily vaccine-driven, if that makes sense. And
where do you find, I'm not going to ask about holistic vets, but how do you know if your vet is vaccine-driven?
Well, I think that a lot of veterinary practice aren't anymore. So we used to get 25 years ago, we got the dogs in, the pets in, because people wouldn't come if they weren't coming for a specific vaccine,
Right. So it's your 6-month checkup and booster shot.
Well, even, every couple of years people would come and bring their dog to the vet. People are much more wellness aware now. So the idea is that, the wellness part of it is the important part. The vaccination is again, a discussion that should happen between you and your veterinarian. And so you have to say, okay, what is my risk of this? Do I really understand my risk? I'm going to discuss it with my vet. So someone who does either holistic practice or integrative medicine, who can talk to you about what is the science out there and what are things that aren't science. You've got to take a risk if you're not going to vaccinate your dog against all the vaccines that are out there, all the diseases that are out there, and that's okay, So, and then you start with, okay, what are we going to do to address the problem, the underlying problem, and not just suppress the symptoms, which is what we're doing with these itch-blocking medications. To be honest with you, there are people out there who just want to suppress those symptoms, and they can't be involved in everything else is too much for them, And so what is your choice but to make this the only way that you're going to make the dog comfortable, and so you put them on medications like that. But, the whole idea about a diet, lifestyle, vaccination, et cetera, in affecting your dog's immune system. Allergies are all about the immune system. How are they brought up? What kind of food are they being fed? What's going on with the parents of the dog that you're getting? So all of those are factors in what you're seeing, what you're getting as far as symptoms of disease. And that's sort of a long, it's the short version of things that you need to think about as far as treatment goes. So you need to have a holistic veterinarian. So you're going to look at all the aspects of your pet and kind of decide, what you're going to do at that point. Diet is a big part of it.
And how patient do you have to be when you are in the holistic business?
Oh, incredibly patient.
Okay. So no, this is something to be aware of. Because,
right.
It's
so
not...
I deal with Chinese herbal medicine, and so I will try to convince people that you really want to get to the bottom of this, but your dog's had allergies now and been on an inflammatory diet now for 6 years. And so for me to put your dog on these herbal formulas and have them be better in a month is a completely unrealistic expectation. Changing diet, and so you have to have a lot of patience. The ideal situation is to start when you've got a puppy or a kitten. Get the advice that you want from someone who is like-minded,
right?
And start from that.
And in this situation where you've got a 3-year-old, I mean, that's better than a 6-year-old.
Yes.
Would you recommend Chinese herbal, or would you,
Well, I would have to look at everything.
Right.
So it's not an easy.
So so that's not a yes or no. But I guess for someone who's not, what should they look for?
Take this dog, if you're going to take a dog who's been on, a super high starch diet and give them herbs, you're probably not going to see any response. Maybe a tiny little bit. It depends on whether they have seborrhea. It depends on whether they have chronic infections, those kinds of things. About all the different things that you can do, but it is so totally individualized.
Right, but I guess what I'm wondering is how would Jace find a holistic vet? Again, AVMA?
You can. Probably listed on the AVMA. I haven't actually looked. And then there's the Holistic Veterinary Medical Association as well.
Okay. All right. So just start there and find
the
someone.
HVMA.
HVMA. All right. Good. And find some of their. She's in Brooklyn, so
I'm sure there's somebody in Brooklyn.
I am sure there is somebody in Brooklyn too. And again, this was totally woo woo, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It is working its way into a more mainstream thing, which is.
Absolutely. And living in Brooklyn, there are lots of dogs, and so you're talking about living in a city now with a dog. The situation is going to be potentially more dire as far as vaccination goes too. So you have to keep all those things in mind. What do I need to vaccinate against? If I choose not to vaccinate, am I willing to take the risk?
But if and just in this question, the dozens of booster vaccine, this life experience short. Most people I have found surprisingly don't know what arnica is. I've known about arnica for so many years that it's just there are tubes all over my everythings. But a lot of people don't know. Titers, I've known about titers for years. You can still line up, I believe, 10 people, and a good percentage of them aren't going to know that that's something you can ask your vet about.
Right.
And
right. So a titer is an antibody level. So checking an antibody level so that you don't revaccinate earlier than you need to.
Right, and that's just something. Just because of the way this is written, dozens of booster vaccinations, 3 years old. It's like, okay, almost the first thing I would say is, yeah, it costs a little more, but check the levels, because if you're, everyone knows what
it does cost a little more, and therein lies the issue. Is that I guess that's my point. Is that you if you want the care that you're looking for, you need to be willing also to follow advice and to pay for it. And because it's not easy and it's not inexpensive.
Right. All right, that's reasonable. Let's go up to Pittsfield. Adam, I read a blog written by a vet the other day that claimed that fleas actually only infest very young, old, or ill dogs and cats, and that if your pet has a healthy immune system, it shouldn't get fleas. That sounds like a crackpot theory to me, but on the other hand, everything else he had to say seemed pretty sound. And it's not hard to imagine the multi-billion-dollar flea medication industry having a stake in our beliefs. What's the truth here?
Well, my opinion is that all dogs and cats can get fleas. It depends on where they are picking them up. But you won't necessarily find an infestation in a healthy animal. So dogs and cats, if they're very healthy, unless they're exposed to all of a sudden you've moved someplace and the house is loaded with eggs and no pet has been there for a while, then they're going to be infested and they won't be able to deal with it. But if your dog is going out and rolling in a dead recently dead fox picking up some fleas, then oftentimes they will chew at the flea and they'll be able to actually eat it and get rid of it if they're healthy. The older they are, the less likely they'll be able to keep up with that. But you can get flea infestations, absolutely, on healthy dogs in houses that have had fleas over and over again. It can be a lot for them to deal with. The other thing is that dogs and cats can become allergic to the saliva from the flea. And the flea injects saliva in order to suck blood. They have to sort of inject it as an anticoagulant, and that can set up an immune response. And so if your dog is allergic to flea saliva, then a bite from one flea can set off this long chain of events. Will your dog be less likely to have a hypersensitivity reaction if they're super healthy and on a good diet? Probably, that's true. So that's something to keep in mind. And I do know people who don't use any protection against fleas. That's not natural. But they're constantly vigilant about checking their dog for any fleas because they don't want to bring, say, 3 or 4 fleas into the house and have those fleas lay hundreds of eggs within a week, and then you're going to be setting yourself up for more of an infestation. So the life cycle is such that the live flea has a blood meal, lays literally hundreds of eggs over its lifetime, which is a few months, and those eggs then go through stages that become infective to the next pet. And they can lie there dormant inside the house for 2 years. So
that's cheerful news.
Yeah.
Don't
so
move.
So there are lots to this. Definitely, if you keep your dog super healthy, just like people, you're going to be more you're able to deal with little things. You're going to be less likely, a human who's super healthy theoretically would be less likely to get scabies and less likely to get spots from demodectic mange and less likely to get ringworm, less likely to get colds, etc. Same thing with your pets. That is true. But as far as the parasites goes, it depends on the situation. And again, depends on what you're willing to risk, So if you've had a really unhealthy dog and you don't want to put any flea product on, then you say, okay, well, I'm going to keep my dog home. I'm not going to let other people in the house who have dogs, who might have fleas, and might not let my dog play with other dogs that I don't know have been protected, and I'm going to be super vigilant and check them with a flea comb every day.
But you know what the best news in this is?
What's that?
A very simple answer. All dogs can get fleas.
I made that a very long answer, didn't I?
Yes. No, well, because you're a balanced person and you want everybody to, you don't want it relegated to the crackpot bin, which is very nice. But the fact is, you could have the healthiest critter in the world, and I guess it's not single factor causation. End of story.
Right, and so people are writing these blogs. So I have a little, this is what's irking me and why I explain so much, because people are writing these blogs without an eye to what makes sense for the general population, right? So.
Yeah, in life, unfortunately, you've got to suddenly factor it. It's
exactly.
Just staggering
life is a big
to me.
part of it.
Yeah.
And not everybody can do what's best for themselves or afford to do. And then, when you're guilting them into trying to do the very best for their pet, which is not even reasonable, sometimes it's just not practical.
Yeah, no, it's one of the good things about having animals, when you're right down to it, is there are certain things you can't, you just have to cope with as they arise. It's just you can't create. It's a really bad idea with human beings as well. But with animate creatures, it's a really poor idea to try and just manage the environment and life so hard and so much that you're just totally taken aback when you're great.
Exactly, and it helps a lot if you don't over animal yourself. You don't over pet. People who have big families and don't have time, and they get too many pets, and they simply can't deal. And it becomes super expensive. And if you've got one pet, that's a wonderful thing. Your pet gets all the attention, or maybe 2, and then you're able to to deal with things that come up, rather than having 7 to 10 cats, and you can't separate them out when you feed them. Not that I'm, of course I advocate for people who have lots of pets, and a lot of people take beautiful care of all of them, but you've got to be able to have the time and the resources.
You just have to be able to manage, as with anything, you've got to be able to manage your numbers. That's all.
There you go.
With people, it's not so very different. And it's, again, there's a huge, huge pressure at this juncture to spend a lot of money. For people who haven't even started families and whatnot, you just spend a lot of money on your critter, and all I'm saying is, you spend what you can, but make sure it's being spent wisely.
Right, on the things that are important for yours and their quality of life. Yeah. And so flea control is something that I have to insist on at our house, because I'm not willing to live with those critters, and I don't have the time to check them every day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cannon. This has been Pet Files Ask the Vet, underwritten by the Millerton Veterinary Practice, 518-789-3440, millertonvet.com.